This is not an easy topic to discuss.
Many of the principles of radical Islam are incompatible with Western values and institutions.
So Muslims are here, they're peaceful people. If just a fraction of them are doing some heinous act, we condemn it.
Muslim, they don't do this. They don't kill people.
Many people who haven't read the Muslim sources assume that Muhammad was dark-skinned.
Muhammad was disgraced by God in death. The one way he said he would die if he's a false prophet, that is exactly how Muhammad died.
Blue-eyed Mark, now known as Malik, got interested in the religion because he liked the way his Lebanese mates at the beach talked about their faith.
Live your life in a peaceful, calm, respectful way. It's about finding a nice way to live life.
Well, here in the West, there's a general atmosphere of ignorance about Islam. People don't know even the most basic facts about Muhammad and the Quran.
Islam is a faith of love and compassion. One of the core Islamic values is the well-being and protection of families and every member of the community. Allah the Almighty says in the Holy Quran that whosoever kills one innocent soul, it is as if he has killed all of humanity. And whosoever saves and protects one soul, it is as if he has saved all of mankind.
Islam is often presented as a very simple religion. It's just submission to Allah. But if you dig a little deeper, you find out in the Quran, Surah 4, verse 65, that submission to Allah requires complete obedience to all of Muhammad's decisions. And that's where Islam gets a lot more complicated, because Muhammad's decisions are spread across thousands of stories in the Hadith.
In her latest project, By the Numbers, the untold story of Muslim opinions and demographics, Raza warns that Islam presents a great threat.
In light of the fact that most of the terrorism in the world today involves Muslims in one way or another, and because it directly affects our lives and security, I think that we need to be able to have an open, honest, and fact-based conversation about that.
Let's look at some facts about Islam. First, the Muslim sources are filled with commands to violently subjugate non-Muslims, fight those who do not believe in Allah, strive hard against the unbelievers and the hypocrites and be unyielding to them. Fight those of the unbelievers who are near to you and let them find in you hardness. In the Hadith, Sahih Muslim 129, Muhammad declares, I have been commanded to fight people until they bear witness that none has the right to be worshipped but Allah, and that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. So there are standing orders to violently subjugate non-Muslims because of their beliefs, when the Muslim community is in a position to do so. Second, even though there are general calls to violently subjugate non-Muslims when the Muslim community is able to do it, there are more specific commands to target those who cause problems in Muslim lands. Surah 5, verse 33 of the Quran, for instance, lays down penalties for those who wage war against Allah. How do you wage war against Allah? By committing the vague crime of doing mischief in a Muslim land. Depending on the severity of the mischief, the penalty can be exile, crucifixion, death, or dismemberment.
Today in Paris, in broad daylight, masked men entered the editorial offices of a satirical magazine.
Their target in the heart of Paris was the satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo. Minutes later, more killing as police officers confront the gunman. One attacker walks to a wounded officer and shoots him point blank.
Charlie Hebdo is a satirical French weekly publication that is most known for its biting humor and more specifically for a string of cartoons that it has published about Islam and the Prophet Muhammad. This isn't the first time that Charlie Hebdo has been attacked. In 2011, the magazine published an article guest edited by Muhammad. After that issue was published, the magazine's office was firebombed and its website was hacked. The attackers posted a notice on the hacked site that read, "You keep abusing Islam's almighty prophet with disgusting and disgraceful cartoons using excuses of freedom of speech."
The most extreme form of doing mischief, however, is bringing a non-Muslim military into a Muslim land. Now, not according to us, but according to Islam, has the U.S. military done mischief in Muslim lands? Absolutely. So those soldiers are under a death penalty. But it doesn't end there, because according to Muhammad himself, the people who support soldiers, the people who pay the bills for the military, receive the same reward as the soldiers who actually fight. Who pays the bills for the U.S. military? The U.S. government, which receives its money from U.S. taxpayers. U.S. taxpayers are therefore under the same Islamic penalty as the U.S. soldiers who fight in Iraq or Afghanistan.
Good evening. Important symbols of American power have been hit today by a series of devastating terrorist attacks.
Terrorists attack the heart of America with catastrophic loss of life. Hijacked planes smash into and destroy New York's tallest buildings. Both towers of the World Trade Center collapse with thousands trapped. Another plane explodes on the Pentagon, mocking America's defensive might. In the streets, panic and the certainty that casualties are horrendous.
Came in like a missile, like a fireball missile across from the New York harbor side, I guess from the Newark direction. It came in like a spear. It just speared through the building like a fireball.
Third, Muhammad's favorite method, the method that he claimed brought him victory, was terrorism. In Sahih al-Bukhari 2977, Muhammad proclaims, "I've been made victorious with terror." Not tolerance, not kindness, not interfaith dialogue, terror.
Hundreds more wounded in the second major terror attack inside Paris this year. ISIS has claimed responsibility. And this morning, we're learning that a Syrian passport was found on one of the 8 terrorists in Georgia. This is the third major attack that ISIS has claimed responsibility for in just the last couple of weeks.
Earlier, we reported that ISIS leaders called for more attacks during the holy month of Ramadan, which ends in roughly 8 days. But just yesterday, ISIS claimed responsibility for 3 other attacks, including Yemen, where at least 43 people were killed in a string of attacks. Then a suicide bomber in Jordan killed at least 7 more. And in Lebanon, 4 Islamic State militants reportedly blew themselves up in a Christian-dominated city. 5 more people died there. And now we have this in Turkey.
The government is blaming the Islamic State organisation. Jasper Mortimer has more from Istanbul.
3 suicide bombers stormed the busy international terminal, one reportedly opening fire with a Kalashnikov machine gun and detonating a device after being shot by police. The Turkish Prime Minister has now blamed the so-called Islamic State group for the assault. This is one of the busiest airports in Europe. More than 61 million passengers passed through here last year. The volume of passengers making it a vulnerable target, and many now say the authorities were unprepared for an assault of this scale.
Well, this is certainly the 3rd attack on tourist sites in Istanbul this year. In January, Islamic State attacked Sultan Ahmed, killing 12 tourists, mostly German. In March, Islamic State attacked Istiklal Caddesi, the famous pedestrian mall in the old part of the city, killing 4 tourists. Last night, 13 of the 41 casualties were foreigners, and 3 of the Turks were people who worked in the tourism industry. You know, we've had bombings in Turkey at the rate of 1 or 2 a month for 13 months now, and these bombings have killed more than 250 people. And the saddest fact is there is no end in sight.
Why attack a gay nightclub in Orlando? Fourth, Muhammad ordered his followers to execute homosexuals for sodomy. In Sunan Abu Dawud 44:47, he says, "If you find anyone doing as Lot's people did, kill the one who does it and the one to whom it is done." Lot's people are the men of Sodom who were homosexuals.
Tonight we have details of a mass shooting at a nightclub in Orlando, Florida.
News out of Florida continues now. It is now officially the worst mass shooting in American history.
Unfolding inside the club, which is popular with the gay community, at least one gunman armed with a semi-automatic weapon on a rampage, barricaded with hostages.
Police say at least 50 people are dead.
Look at that, they're shooting back and forth. Oh my God, they're all shooting back and forth.
They are saying that Mateen, they're calling him an Islamic State fighter now. An Islamic State fighter now. They're claiming him as one of their own.
Fifth, in Islam, Muslims have to obey their leader as long as the leader isn't calling for something that violates the commands of Allah and Muhammad. In Sahih al-Bukhari 71:44, Muhammad maintains, "A Muslim has to listen to and obey the order of his Muslim ruler, whether he likes it or not, as long as his orders involve not one in disobedience to Allah. But if an act of disobedience to Allah is imposed, one should not listen to it or obey it. So if your leader, the caliph, orders you to do something that doesn't involve disobedience to Allah, you have to obey. Recently, ISIS called for Ramadan terrorist attacks against Western targets. Based on the passages we've examined, do terrorist attacks against unbelievers, particularly unbelievers who fund the U.S. military through their taxes, violate the commands of Allah and Muhammad? Obviously not, since Islam explicitly calls for such attacks. So if you regard Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi as your leader, do you have to obey? Yes, you do, especially during Ramadan when you're trying to be extra devout. But why would Mateen target a gay nightclub when U.S. taxpayers in general have been sentenced to death? Well, terrorists in the West seem to target people who are under as many Islamic death penalties as possible. It's as if the terrorists ask themselves, why go after these guys who are only under one Islamic death penalty when I can go after those guys who are under 3 Islamic death penalties?
Produced by the Clarion Project, Raza describes so-called spheres of radicalization. At the core is what she calls violent jihadists like ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Hezbollah, and Boko Haram.
These are the jihadists who murder people in San Bernardino, Texas, Paris, London, Delhi, Jerusalem, Ottawa, Madrid, Nairobi.
A second sphere, Raza says, are those who support jihadist goals but not their methods. For example, while they push for an Islamic takeover, they do so through democratic methods.
Islamists want many of the same things as the jihadists, it's just that their tactics differ.
She points to the large percentage of Egyptians who supported the Muslim Brotherhood, or the Palestinians who voted to give political power to the terrorist group Hamas.
So instead of engaging in terror themselves, they use the political and cultural system to further their aims.
The third sphere, and the largest of them all, is what Raza also calls the most disturbing, the fundamentalists.
The Muslims in this circle are certainly not like ISIS, and they're not working to overthrow governments like the Muslim Brotherhood. But they do hold beliefs and practices that no doubt will seem radical to you and me.
She points to an exhaustive Pew Research project in 2013 that interviewed thousands of Muslims across 39 countries. In the survey, large numbers of Muslims, representing millions of people, thought it was justifiable to execute people who converted away from Islam and to murder women who dishonor the family.
These studies paint a picture of an Islamic world that is increasingly out of step with the modern world.
In the same survey, alarming numbers of young Muslims in Western countries also supported suicide bombings.
42% of French Muslims, 35% of British Muslims, and 26% of American Muslims believe suicide bombings against non-Muslims can be justified.
And equally shocking, Raza adds, is the large percentage of Muslims who want Sharia law, which calls for stoning of adulterers and chopping off thieves' hands, to be the law of the land.
Of course, not every Muslim believes in these things, but hundreds of millions do. The numbers are right here for all to see.
Raza says if radical Islam is ever to be defeated, an honest conversation must happen about one of the most important issues of our time.
By silencing the debate about radical Islamist beliefs, we abandon our own core beliefs of truth, free speech, and tolerance. And we abandon human rights in favor of political correctness.
We need to be involved in the conversation, involved with questions like, how can Hamas win an election in the Gaza Strip? How can a terrorist group win a popular election? How can the Muslim Brotherhood win an election in Egypt unless there wasn't a strong opinion in that electorate that they would run the country well? We need to look at these numbers. We need to look at what is causing radical jihadists to arise from Islam. What is it about public opinion? What is it about what is being preached in the mosque? How can we get translations of those sermons to better understand why are people being radicalized?
And that's where Islam gets a lot more complicated, because Muhammad's decisions are spread across thousands of stories in the Hadith.
2014 is going down in history as the year with the highest level of persecution of Christians in modern times.
Hey, John, well, it is a very dangerous time to be a Christian. Torture, beheadings, destruction of property, all increasing, and that's according to the Christian watchdog group Open Doors USA, which released its annual World Watch List today. Although North Korea and its brutal imprisonment of Christians tops the list of 50 countries hostile to the faith, Islamic extremism remains the #1 threat.
Remember this, radical Islam is anti-woman, anti-gay, and anti-American.
Islam's only weapons are manipulation, deception, and terror. When you throw out some of the clearest commands of Allah and Muhammad because you don't like them, you become just as much of a target as the rest of us, because the Quran commands Muslims to wage jihad not only against unbelievers, but also against hypocrites. Second, you've been saying that jihadis don't represent you for years. You've been marginalizing them for years, and terrorist attacks are increasing rapidly. Here's a chart of global deaths from terrorism between the years 2000 and 2014. Do you see the rapid increase in recent years? That's the kind of curve you want to see if you're checking your bank account or your YouTube subscribers, but not if you're looking at a chart of people being slaughtered. This curve means that your current strategy is about as effective as the Bring Back Our Girls hashtag campaign was for rescuing girls kidnapped by Boko Haram. Jihadis don't care about your hashtags, and they definitely don't care what you say at your press conferences. If you have no plan for dealing with jihad, apart from insisting that it has nothing to do with Islam, let me tell you what I'm hearing from you right now. The message of moderate Muslims is this: our religion is growing rapidly. It's a peaceful religion, but our most trusted sources are filled with violent commands that are easy to misunderstand if you don't radically reinterpret them to bring them in line with Western values. Unfortunately, because some Muslims don't reinterpret them, there's a sizable and growing number of jihadis who want to slaughter as many of you as possible. Moreover, there's absolutely nothing we can do to stop the growth of this violent movement. However, if you're at all concerned about the spread of our religion, a religion that always comes with a misinformed but uncontrollably violent element, you're a racist and a bigot. The reason you're convinced that people who criticize Islam are racists and Islamophobes goes something like this. Since there's no connection between Islam and terrorism, anyone who thinks there's a connection between Islam and terrorism must be delusional. The source of this delusion can only be hatred or bigotry. So anyone who's critical of Islam must be a racist and an Islamophobe. Now, let's pretend, for the sake of argument, that you're right and that Islam is actually a religion of peace. My question is this: what's the difference, practically speaking, between, on the one hand, a religion that commands its adherents to violently subjugate unbelievers, and, on the other hand, a religion that only sounds like it commands its adherents to violently subjugate unbelievers? In other words, what's the difference between a religion that commands fight those who do not believe in Allah and really means it, and a religion that commands fight those who do not believe in Allah but doesn't really mean it? In both religions, there are going to be people who obey the command, either because the religion really commands it or because the religion sounds like it commands it. And in both religions, there are going to be large numbers of people who don't obey the command because they don't take it very seriously. Either way, people are being killed. If your religion is theoretically peaceful, but for all practical purposes is completely indistinguishable from a religion of violence, oppression, and cruelty, why would a person be a bigot for expressing concerns about the spread of your religion? Pop quiz: who's the whitest prophet in history? You're probably thinking Joseph Smith, founder of Mormonism, right? What if I also told you that this pale, pasty white prophet had black slaves and referred to Ethiopians as raisin heads? Would you call him a racist? Or would you give him yet another free pass because our expectations automatically drop to the floor whenever we discuss the Prophet of Islam? So if we want to know what Muhammad looked like, we'll have to go through some of the descriptions of his appearance found in the Hadith. Sahih al-Bukhari, number 63. Narrated Anas bin Malik: while we were sitting with the Prophet in the mosque, a man came riding on a camel. He made his camel kneel down in the mosque, tied its foreleg, and then said, "Who amongst you is Muhammad?" At that time, the Prophet was sitting amongst us, leaning on his arm. We replied, "This white man reclining on his arm." But let's keep reading about a prophet who makes the Brady Bunch look like NWA. Sahih Muslim 6081. It was narrated that Abu Juhayfa said, "I saw the Messenger of Allah with a white complexion and some white hairs." And the Muslim sources go out of their way to remind us how white Muhammad was. They tell us about the whiteness of his shins, and the whiteness of his thigh, and the whiteness of his leg, and the whiteness of his stomach, and the whiteness of his forearms, and the whiteness of his armpits, and the whiteness of his cheeks. But when he wasn't busy being scooped onto a slice of apple pie, he was setting an example for his followers by keeping a tight rein on all his black slaves. Sahih al-Bukhari 7263. Narrated Umar, "I went to the house of the Prophet, and behold, Allah's messenger was staying in a mashraba, and a black slave of Allah's messenger was at the top of its stairs. I said to him, 'Tell the Prophet that here is Umar bin al-Khattab.' Then he admitted me." In Provisions of the Afterlife, pages 30 to 31, Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyya lists 28 of Muhammad's male slaves and 12 of his female slaves. Some of these slaves were black, some were not. Muhammad apparently thought that black slaves were worth less than Arab slaves, since he once traded 2 of his black slaves for an Arab slave he wanted to set free because the Arab slave had converted to Islam. Muhammad tells his followers what Satan looks like in Ibn Asaq, page 243. The apostle said, "Whoever wants to see Satan, let him look at Nabtal ibn al-Harith. He was a sturdy black man with long flowing hair, inflamed eyes, and dark ruddy cheeks." Which one of you is the prophet? This white guy. What does Satan look like? That black guy. Now, how did a religion that was inaugurated by a white prophet who had black slaves and referred to Ethiopians as raisin heads and said that Satan looks like a black man ever get the reputation it has among African American Muslims today? Well, here in the West, there's a general atmosphere of ignorance about Islam. People don't know even the most basic facts about Muhammad and the Quran, and this allows Muslim preachers to say whatever they want about Islam because no one's going to correct them. Absolute nonsense, but people convert to Islam because they believe what they're told and don't bother reading the Muslim sources to see if the preacher's story checks out. But now that you've seen what the Muslim sources say, now that you know you've been deceived, you have a choice. Just remember that if you continue honoring a slave trader who's about as dark as the cream filling of a Twinkie and who had black slaves and called Ethiopians raisin heads and said that Satan looks like a black man, you're not a freedom fighter or a social justice warrior or a champion of civil rights. And in case you'd like to know how seriously they take Muhammad's whiteness in the Muslim world, I'll leave you with a quotation from Ash-Shifa, one of Islam's most popular and respected books on Muhammad's life and teachings. Ahmed ibn Sulaiman, Sahnun's companion, said that whoever says that the Prophet was black is killed. The Prophet was not black. Calling Muhammad a black man was a death penalty. Let's look at some facts. Islam's only weapons are manipulation, deception, and terror. If something is impervious to those weapons, Islam cannot succeed against it. What's impervious to Islam? Very simple. An informed population of free people. If you're thinking, but we already have that, you're currently part of the problem, because what we have now is a misinformed population of gullible drones. An informed population of free people will demand truth from the media, and the media will have to adapt or they'll go out of business. An informed population of free people will elect leaders who make good decisions, not sniveling cowards who sacrifice their country on the altar of political correctness. An informed population of free people will not fall for taqiyya. An informed population of free people will never submit. An informed population of free people will openly criticize Muhammad, and Muhammad cannot stand up to criticism. Any real, lasting solution to the problem of Islamic terror must begin with building an informed population of free people.